one that's commonly used, whakatakate hau. Whakatakate hau ki te uru, whakatakate hau ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai. Ehi iaka ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, tihei Maori ora. I will do the English translation for those that like to have that. Cease, O winds from the west. Cease, O winds from the south. Bring calm breezes over the land. Bring calm breezes over the sea, and let the red-tipped dawn come with a touch of frost, a sharpened air, and a promise of a glorious day. Behold, we live, tihe Maori ora. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you. So we'll crack straight into it. We've got a bit to get through today. Not a huge agenda, but there's some stuff in there that we'll need to work our way through, and then we've got a workshop afterwards. So we'll call for apologies.
I would like to withdraw my apologies because I am here.
You are here.
But I do need to leave at 10 to 2 for about half an hour for a medical intervention.
Thank you, Peter. Noted, and appreciate that. And welcome. Nice to have you here rather than not here as we were expecting. Do we have any public forum today? No public forum registered. Any items not on the agenda? There being none, any conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, sorry.
There is a public excluded item later on that I will need to absent myself from.
Thank you, Councillor Connell. Much appreciated. And before we go too much further, we'll just say a welcome and a hello to Dale Ofsosky, who's here for one of the items a bit later on. So welcome, Dale. Okay, we'll go to item 1.7, 1.6 minutes for confirmation, page 3, please. We've got Risk and Assurance Committee and Thames Community Board, and then the TCDC minutes. So from 18th of February. So could I get a mover and a seconder, please, for items 1, 2, and 3? Take these as a block. Is there any corrections or things that people would like to address individually on these items? Peter, you had something you wanted? You're seconding? Okay. All right. Robin, please.
Just a minor correction to the minutes for the 18th of February. I left the room at, in the recording, it's 1 hour, 7 minutes and 18 seconds in the second part of the recording, so I wasn't present for the vote for 3.4 or 3.5.
Thank you.
All right.
Through the chair, we'll note those changes.
Thank you.
Also, just would like to note what I sent out to elected members last night in regards to the lease for Whangamata Community Board recommendation. Has everyone seen those changes, and do you want me to show them up on screen? Okay.
Thank you. And yes, that's great. The other ones that we discussed earlier were in PX. So
Correct.
Thank you. All right, we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Item 1.7, external committee minutes for confirmation. And we have Karakia Rail Trail Charitable Trust. Could I get a mover and a seconder to receive these, please? Councillor Rodley, yes, moving. Councillor Morrissey seconding. Any corrections or things that we need to note on these? No, there being none. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Item 2.1, elections update and order of voting document, which is page 37. We'll welcome Dale. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. You know the process with the microphones. Thank you. So if I can hand over to you, Dale, I'm gonna assume that councillors have read the documentation. It seems pretty straightforward, but maybe if you could just give us a quick summary, please, that would help.
Good, everyone. Can you hear me? Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I take it everyone's read this report. There's a lot of background information in that, such as, we've had some legislative changes last year. So the whole process is brought forward. So nominations will open earlier than previously on the 4th of July. But backtracking, we had a rep review undertaken. We had a change in some representation, not much, but we had some change in representation as a result of the Māori ward. And further to that, of course, we have a Māori ward poll at the same time as 2025 elections. I've basically covered everything. The main point of this report, though, is that council has an opportunity every 3 years to choose the order of candidate names on the voting document. So the main purpose of this report is if you want to change it from alphabetical, now's the opportunity to do so. It's a resolution, and there are three options that you can have. You can have alphabetical, which we're all familiar with. You can have pseudo-random, which is basically once nominations close, we put the names into a container and we pull those out, or JP pulls those out, and that's the order everyone gets. And random is every voting document has a different order, and that's computer generated in the printing process. So they are the three processes, three orders that we can choose. If you don't have a resolution, then it defaults to alphabetical. So it's quite a straightforward resolution there, and I put a recommendation there. Council resolves for the 2025 training elections to adopt either the alphabetical order of candidate names or the pseudo-random order of candidate names or the random order of candidate names as permitted under the regulations. There is no cost difference, by the way, if you choose either of those. The way printing occurs now, it's all on the fly. So if you choose random, there's no additional cost in that. There used to be, but there is no longer. I just probably prior to my recommendation, I just talked a little bit about the need for your pre-election report by the end of June. Promotion of the election, that's the chief executive's role under the Local Government Act that came into force just prior to the 2022 training elections. And that's really an important role to promote participation and diversity around the council table. And the final one is your pre-election period, which is 3 months before election day, where council must be mindful not to make any significant decisions, and also be careful that it's business as usual, but it's a fine line between business as usual and electioneering. So council must continue to operate right up to the election, but we must be very mindful of what we can and can't do or should not do in that period. So that's really very snapshot view of my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Councillors, any questions? We've got Councillor Morrissey in my blind spot, which I'm keeping an eye on today.
Yep.
Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Gottlieb, and Terry. Thank you, in that order.
Sorry, Dale, just a point of clarification on something you said. Council must not make any significant decisions within that 3-month period, but business as usual. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I can recall we appointed a CEO during that period last time. Pretty significant decision by council, but business as usual had to be done. I'm thinking of there was another. We've got some significant decisions coming up prior to the election. We certainly can't defer. So can you just broaden that a little bit?
Yes, I've raised this with a number of our councils, and the same issues have arisen. What's what's a significant decision? Some councillors have said, well, they're making significant decisions around the water issue. That can't be stopped. Another councillor is making a decision about the adoption of the annual plan. That can't be stopped either. So there are some, it's just guidance that we're saying that don't make significant decisions that may impact the running of the council in the future, because you're likely to have a new council coming in on the 11th of October. But you've got to balance that out with, well, council still has to function. It still has to make decisions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, please.
Probably for the benefit of everyone, I had been asking about census figures. Perhaps you could explain to the members what's happened there.
Thank you, councillor. Yes, almost weekly we have been in touch with the Local Government Commission, who has been charged to gather the latest census population estimates for us to use. We need them for the 2025 training election for our candidate expenditure, which is based on the latest population figures. Even as late as last Friday, I was in Wellington and I talked to the Local Government Commission, who sort of hung their head and said, it's not our fault, Dale, it's the Department of Statistics. They are being very slow. We originally offered or told it was going to be end of January, then end of February. Now it's April. So we're in their hands. I can't do any more. We've been sort of beating the drum and saying, you know, we need this information. It's holding up, our booklets and things like that. And the Commission just says, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it.
And as you know, that I was waiting for the results just to see if they didn't match up with what the anticipated was. And it's really been a bit of abusive process with that happening with the Statistics Department, something they've had such an amount of time to do. And one can only just express concern that this has happened, which clearly the Commission is, as you say, hanging their heads. How could this happen?
I can assure you it's not deliberate. It's just one of those things in the timing thing, which is unfortunate. Yeah.
Thanks, Gary. Terry, please.
Yeah, morning, Dale. I was interested in reading about the non-resident ratepayers and how to contact them. And there were some options in there you threw around. Can you elaborate any more than what we're currently doing? Just like a letter going out with the rates type thing?
So what I've said there is the legal requirements that council must do. Okay, there's certain things that you must do, like the insert and things like that. That's your minimum. So a council can do other things in addition to that, whatever they feel is most appropriate for their district. Now, this district is quite unique. It's probably one of the biggest non-resident ratepayer roles in the country. I think this one and Queenstown Lakes might be the other one. So anything that this council can do to encourage people to enrol on the non-resident ratepayer roll, it's not automatic. And a lot of people sort of think, oh, I pay rates, then I'm automatically a ratepayer elector. That's not the case. It's by application. Even the 2022 ratepayer electors are being issued what we call a confirmation letter. That's a legal requirement that's going out very shortly. And they have to reapply, basically. They have to say, yes, these details are all correct, sign it and send it in, and then they're on to the 2025 roll. But anything that the council can do, and by way of additional communications, public notices, or any ratepayer association, anything like that is to be encouraged, because what we're doing is the minimum.
Guys, can I jump in for a second? The resolutions in front of us are to determine the order of the listings on the election papers. We've got off track a little bit, but I also appreciate that Dale's here. We've got questions, and it's an opportunity to maybe bounce some of those questions off Dale. Now, I know that Ari's advised me that we've got some election protocols for elected members that will be added to the recommendation, and there's going to be more discussion on these on the 25th. So the staff will be giving us a more detailed briefing on that on the 25th. So I wonder whether I'm keen to encourage questions while Dale's here, but I wonder whether we shouldn't get back to the resolution at hand, which is what's the order of
Well, if you
listings
let
on the
me
election.
finish what I wanted to ask the question.
Gary,
Is
sorry.
that directly related to what he was talking about? Would it be appropriate if the council were to email non-permanent resident ratepayers, because they have their email address, would that be a proper thing to do to advise them to get on get on the roll?
As I said, what I've covered off here is your minimum legal requirements, but council, as it sees fit, can do other actions if it like to encourage or educate those non-resident ratepayers about their ability to enrol and get onto the roll. So yes, would have no problem in that as an avenue. It's really just reinforcing, getting that message out to those electors that, hey, you can actually enrol.
Your worship, I'm happy to move option 3, status quo.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's.
Second that. So I've also got Delhi wanting to,
Then we.
yeah. Okay.
Here.
I think that we've got the wonderful Dale in the room, and it's an awesome opportunity to have your expertise in the room. So questions very important. I too wanted to emphasise the information around absentee ratepayers, because the people I'm talking to in the street are still confused, and I think particularly on the East Coast, actually all of our wards do have a lot of holiday home owners, and the perception is that they can only vote in the location where they live, and I really would like that somehow to debunk that. The other question I have is around the pre-election period. So from July through to voting closing, there is a being very careful to be non-electioneering whilst going about your business as an elected member. What happens between now and the 1st of July?
The protocols and the elected member protocols that have been issued by Taitawara and Local Government New Zealand, based on the Office of the Auditor General's previous ones, really only apply for that 3-month pre-election period. I have noticed going around the traps that electioneering, if you like, is starting earlier than previously. But again, it's the same, coming back to the same principles, if you like, that, if you're starting electioneering earlier, it's the same principles. You cannot use council resources and that sort of thing. You cannot abuse that. But it is primarily focused on that 3-month period, which is a sensitive period. That's when nominations are opening. That's when voting packs are issued to electors and that sort of thing. That's when we have to particularly careful that we don't cross the line.
So it is quite grey, and it is technically we should be doing business as usual right from now until the election period, and being very careful about how we go about our engagements and our actions as an elected member.
Yes, we just have to be mindful that we're wearing 2 hats, basically. We're wearing councillor hats and business as usual because the council still must function. And we're also wearing a candidate or a potential candidate hat that I'm standing for re-election. Yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be briefed on the protocols on the 25th, so there'll be an opportunity to get into that in a bit more detail then. John Grant, please.
Thanks very much. Good morning, Dale. A lot of what I was going to ask has been covered, and I'll respect the discussion that's coming up on the 21st. But I am very interested in exploring the question of the non-resident ratepayers, and even if perhaps you can't answer this today, it would be interesting to get that information for when we are cycling back to the discussions at a later stage. But just how we currently perform compared to other places that have high proportion of non-resident ratepayers, and whether there is anything that you are aware of that they do that we don't do that could lift their participation rates, would be of interest.
If I can be honest, the non-resident ratepayer role has a pretty low impact right across the country. Even other jurisdictions like Queenstown Lakes, like Far North, which have high holiday places, struggle with this. The numbers are extremely low. As you know, I represent Auckland Council. That is another one that has a large number simply on the size. And in that instance, it's not just holiday places, it's businesses and that sort of thing. I mean, we're tracking only about, 1,500 out of 1.5 million electors for Auckland. So, right across the country, it's struggling. There is a national advertising campaign that Taitoara puts out in May. That will go out in all the newspapers and websites. We've got the insert going out. It really is what I would suggest or recommend to a council as a process is to give further clarification or education around that role, because we know that a lot of people actually don't even know that it exists. And if they did know it exists, they would probably apply, but it is by application, it's not automatic.
Thanks, Dale. Peter, did you have a question?
Yes, I do, but it's not related to the resolution. Is that okay?
Look, as I said, with Dale here, I think it's an opportunity just to fire those questions out.
So Dale, if I could just have a bite at this cherry too. I own property in 4 jurisdictions, and for the first time in 2016, I decided that I would vote as a non-resident voter. I failed because I just wasn't able to work, whatever the process was. To this point, I have not done it, but this year I thought I'm going to actually really try and understand this and make some progress. And what I discovered is the process for each jurisdiction was different. For instance, in Auckland, it's something that I was able to complete in about 8 minutes and got confirmation that I was on the roll in, within an hour or something like that. In Ruapehu district, it was a completely different process. And when I pretended to be an absentee ratepayer here, I realised that the form, again, was a very different form from the other ones. So I was a bit bemused by that because I would have thought there would have been a standard process across the country for that. And I guess part of that is how easy can we make it for people to do it? And I sort of, pick this up and I think, okay, that's good and it's informative, but it doesn't actually tell me as an absentee ratepayer from Ruapehu district what I have to do, etc. And so there still ends up being a huge amount of work. So it seems to me that it's actually a significant barrier to democracy.
Thank you for that. So 2 points. That cumbersome application form is a statutory form, and we have a lot of hassle with that because it is difficult to work through because you've got sole ratepayers, you've got joint ratepayers and organisations and that sort of thing. What we have done this year is we've rolled out an app called ratepayer.co.nz that's live now, and that will guide people through and they can actually put their details in and that'll tell them what they're eligible for, and it'll also give them the form to fill out. So that's hopefully will streamline things for filling out the form. They can see immediately what they're eligible for or what they're not eligible for. But the criteria is complicated. If you're outside of the district, you get to vote where you reside, and you have a property here, you can get to vote for here. But in Thames, for example, you can also get additional votes for community boards if you have different properties in community boards. So it is not straightforward. And a lot of people, that's part of that education that we need to put out in simplified language. So I think, with our app, I think that will assist. It should be on Council's website now. It does refer back to that complicated form because it's a statutory form. We have to comply with it. With regard to Ruapehu, that's not one of our councils, if I can say so, but Auckland and Thames are, so they should be consistent. So I'd be really keen to know what was different because we look after both. Yeah.
Thanks, Dale. Robin, please.
I just had a look at my rates bill that I received on the 17th of January, and in fact there was an attachment suggesting that I could be eligible to vote in multiple districts. So I recognise that our council has already put out comments on that. Second thing, I just wanted to double check with the actual recommendation. So the recommendation is that we receive the report, adopt for the triennial elections, and then the three options listed there are 1, alphabetical order, 2, pseudo-random order, 3, random order. Now, John, can you just confirm, you said that you wanted to move option 3, but in the recommendation that's listed on page 37, that's actually recommendation 1, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And Terry, you happy to second that? So we've got the preferred and the one that John's moved. We've got that right. Peter, did you have another question? Yeah, thank you. 37 recommendations, and Councillor Morrissey is moving. Okay. Is there separate wording for that, or we're just going to have them?
Share it.
So Ari is just going to share, in addition to the recommendations that we receive, the protocols that will be fully briefed on the 25th. So she's just going to put that up on the screen now. So, and then I'll come back to Councillor Morrissey and ask if, sorry, Aileen.
Can I just clarify, have councillors received a copy of them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, through the chair, this was circulated to councillors. I think it was last week I circulated the protocols.
Just make a quick comment that, and I know our team worked very, very hard writing the reports. It is really confusing when the option and the recommendation is 1, but in the table it's 3. So we've just had to clarify that and had a little bit of discussion around the table. So we're not that smart. So it's really good if the numbers line up.
Can you strike that from the record, please?
Point taken. Thank you for that.
Okay, so Councillor Morrissey, you're happy to include that in your motion?
Yep, that's the way.
Councillor Walker, you're happy to second that?
Yes.
All right. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Alphabetical it is. Dale, thank you so much. Peter, did you have another?
I do have it. It's probably a question for Donna, just related to the comments that have been made about significant decisions. The one sitting in the back of my mind is the discussion and debate we've been having around rate review, and I'm just wondering whether that debate will end before the blackout period or whatever.
Through the chair, that's what we've tried to do by saying the 15th of July as the date that we're seeking a decision on the rates review.
Does that help?
I was just wondering if Dale might have a comment on that. Microphone.
Thank you. The 3-month period, there was an aberration in the legislative changes that were made by the Department of Internal Affairs last year. The 3-month period generally coincides with the nomination period. When they brought forward the nomination date to the 4th, they forgot to change the 3-month period, which legally is the 11th of July to the 11th of October. That's the legal period for 3 months. Some councils are adopting the earlier date of when nominations open because for obvious reasons. But if you wanted to be strictly within the law with a 3-month period, it's the 11th of July. And I note that you're mentioning the 15th of July. If that can possibly be brought forward to the 11th, that would sort of satisfy everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We'll definitely look at doing that. Thank you.
Thanks,
What
Dale.
if we hadn't reached a resolution of the rate aspect? Do we have to seek approval to continue to make a decision or not?
The 3 months pre-election period is guidance. It's guidance by the sector and is given to all councils that they should follow. As I mentioned earlier, some councils are in the middle of quite sensitive things and cannot stop on the 11th of July. So they're signalling now, one council or a couple of councils in particular, about the water reforms, say we cannot have that decision completed by the 11th. So they're signalling now that will carry on, and another council is finishing their annual plan or not having that available until the end of October. So they're signalling that now.
Okay, councillors, thank you. Dale, much appreciated. And it's great having you here in person and councillors the opportunity just to ask those few questions. I'm sure there'll be a few more as we go through. Thank you so much. Okay, item 2.2, fast track approvals delegations, and I think we've got some updates to this, haven't we? This is page 52. Morena Ellison.
Morena, through the chair, firstly, I'd just like to apologise. I did find some errors in the report that was published. So there is some track changes that Ari has available to put on the screen. In the background information, some of that information was incorrect. So it doesn't actually impact on the decision that's being requested of the council today. This report is standard like the ones you see from time to time when new legislation passes. We are required to delegate authority to staff in order that some of those matters that are operational can be dealt with by staff efficiently. So some of those functions and duties and powers I'm requesting today that the council delegate to the chief executive so that staff can respond in a timely fashion under this act. We're also proposing that there are 3 decisions that the council retain for itself, which are more significant decisions, suggesting that those matters might be ones that you would wish to see before making decisions on. So the full table that sets out the local authority functions, powers and duties is in the background section, section 4. And you can see that I've separated the ones that we proposed for chief executive and to flow down to staff, and the 3 which are to be, we suggest, retained by council. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Councillors, any questions? Peter?
I don't have a question. I'm happy to move.
Acceptance. Second. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alison. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Much appreciated. In theory, we're supposed to be having morning tea. Is everyone happy to carry on? Oh, there he is. Maureen O'Brien. So summer peak period debrief report, page 57. Welcome. Item 3.1. And over to you.
Okay, this is just a sort of high level wrap up of how we did over the peak period. So every year we, as you well know, do a whole heap of preparation internally to make sure internal services have contingency plans in place. This is the culmination of that. All in all, for a sort of high level, we did pretty well. No major issues with water roading, waste management. Our events were well attended and well run. Regulatory functioned well. Customer service requests were down 10.5%, which was quite good. Generally a positive. And a 35% increase in social media traffic. So people are getting the information that they need. From the emergency management sort of side of things, we were involved with daily partners briefing in Whangamata over that peak period to keep an eye on things. Again, police and external agencies didn't have any sort of critical issues. Our main sort of source of excitement over that period was the Kuatunu fire, which was handled well by FENZ and DOC. So we acted in support of that from a civil defence point of view, traffic management and water supply to that area. Pepe Bridge, which I talked to you about before the peak period, had the 10 days of traffic management, which was appreciated from them. And the days we chose lined up well with those peak flows. It didn't solve the problem, but it wasn't an unmanaged sort of mess that it could have been. Hopefully, the bridge replacement in the next couple of years will help ease that impact on the local businesses and the area. Also, it's probably a chance for you guys to give us any feedback on that peak period, how you saw it happen, or any questions that you've got. Over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Deli, and then Terry.
I'd just like to compliment Brian on his presentation at the Kuatunu Fire debrief. There was one heck of a crowd, and Brian was brand new in the job pretty much, and stood up and did an absolutely amazing job. And the debrief was really, really positive event, and a very good thing to attend. I did send the Mercury Bay councillors the notes from that debrief, and I've got them still somewhere on my computer if anyone's interested.
Thank you.
Thanks, Del.
Yes, thank you, Brian, for the report. Couple of points, not one to be raised here today, but I just want to mention the fact that still there's 4 communities that still struggle for water through the summer, and really annoys me that we haven't got infrastructure right for them over when the non-resident ratepayers are in town, when they've paid their full rate. So that's the one that'll, not for you, for someone else to think about. The other one was around the fire ban. It really took a long time to come in this year. It was well past the normal period. Was any comment about that?
So FENZ have moved to rather than a blanket approach, they've had some issues with that, I think, legally, and they have moved to a science-based approach, which means that it changes up and down, could change during the day a couple of times. It takes into account rainfall, humidity, wind, heat, dry matter. It's a hell of a science, actually. It has been pretty contentious. From the communities, especially those that are involved with FENZ, they're used to the security of having a blanket fire ban, and knowing that if they see any fire, that it's an issue. It's something that I think it's just time's gone on, and they're trying to improve their sort of level of service and be a little bit more reactive on things. Whether it's the right decision or not, I don't know.
Yeah, we had a house fire in Whangamata, and the fire ban was not on at all, so it was open season, but there was a lot of concern about the fact that it was really dry and things like that. But yeah, so it's something to consider for sure.
Anecdotally, I think that was quite close to going into the forestry block behind it too.
John Grant, please.
Thanks very much. Just an observation, I guess, is the reality of the consequences of the fatal accident that happened on State Highway 25 on the Thames Coast Road, and the spillover of all the traffic being directed through on the other alternate. It caused absolute chaos on one of the peak days, with traffic built up all the way back to the new bridge on 25A at its worst. That obviously has quite an impact on the people's attitudes about visiting the Coromandel when they see things like that. And I know there isn't a heck of a lot that can be done around those sort of things, but has it been the topic of any conversations? And And are there any options that are not obvious ones that could handle those sort of situations that to avoid huge amounts of traffic buildup?
I actually saw that traffic build-up heading back from Whangamata that day. It was pretty horrendous, right to the top of the 1 ton there. Unfortunately, at this stage, it's been viewed as one of those things that's unavoidable. There's no other sort of real options apart from placing restrictions on the state highway, which would be as damaging as the traffic itself. So yeah, not a lot in the talks that I've had so far with NZTA as a catch-up. It is one of those things that happens. That's their attitude so far.
The sort of things that I was thinking about is actually, just about making it a one-way road for a period of time, just to clear the traffic, because we were still trying to manage it. The traffic coming south was reasonably, light in regard to the backlog going back the other way, but traffic heading north was very congested. So it just didn't look like they had tweaked things. I just mentioned that as to whether it can be a little bit more dynamic in those situations to allow for it.
Yeah, I'll raise that with the NZTA and see what they come up with. From anecdotally, what I heard from police and people that were travelling through that traffic management, they were still quite rigid on their stop-go periods. They weren't changing them as much as you'd expect to manage the demand for longer periods to get that clear. So it could be some valuable feedback we send to them.
Brian, a couple of things, and it carries on from what John's just said. One of the issues that seems to come up quite often is when an incident happens and there is a known road closure, whether it's floods, accidents or whatever, NZTA need to be fast and proactive about getting a signage at the beginnings of those intersections, not letting people go all the way down to Prescott's or something before they find that the road's blocked and then have to turn and go all the way back. The signage needs to happen at the beginning of the intersection or the detour. So rather than go all the way there, all the way back and then have to start their detour, they know early on, and it just saves that. And I've taken this up with NZTA before and they reacted really quickly.
Yep.
They seem to have forgotten it because I'm hearing stories again of people doing all that travel. And it happened at Hikataya when they had that road closure. Rather than have the signage at the beginning, the other end, they left it for people to go all the way down there.
Yeah.
John.
Well, Len, I was just going to absolutely back you on that. I think any early communication would be terrific. And even if it meant that, it'd be encouraging people to spend more time in Thames, because it would be a far more enjoyable experience doing that than stuck in traffic somewhere for extended periods of time. So some form of early notification, I think, would be really, really good, just to give them time frames, as to what likely delays exist on that road.
Thanks, John. And the other thing, we started with 3 days traffic management on the Pepe Bridge through a series of some lobbying and I think some help from Scott Simpson. We got it up to 10 days. Are we going to have to go through, it might be an unfair question for you, are we going to have to go through the same process all over again next year, or is there something that we can do in advance to say, look, it's going to be 2 years away before we get that new bridge. Can we get this happening, or can we lock in 10 days? What do we need to do? What advocacy needs to come from our council to try and get that in early?
Yeah. I can't answer that, but it's certainly on our risk register for the next peak period. So potentially around the same time or perhaps a little bit earlier. If
maybe earlier.
Get that information, and if we need that political push like we did last time, that was really appreciated, and tipped it in our balance. From talks with NZTA management, it was a budgetary, this year's budget was severely changed due to redirecting to pothole management. So we'll see what the new budget looks like.
All right.
this year. And that'll be something that I'll keep an eye on.
Thanks. Maybe it's something we can address a bit earlier on and say, hey guys, it worked really well last time, but it ain't going to work if it's 3 days. So
Yeah, just quick comment, really just around the communication side. I wonder if radio could play a big part in that as well. So they could push that out.
Yeah.
Get the comms that way.
Yep. And when we get notifications, we can potentially do that sort of side messaging that NZTA wouldn't do through their comms channels. They're just very factual. It's something we could look at.
thanks, Brian. Martin, you had a question?
Yeah, so you're talking about signage and things, and I know we've got the big, I don't know what they call them. There's one just on the other side of the Kopu Bridge, and there's one on the way into Thames. I don't know what those great big
NZTA VMS boards.
Yes.
Yep.
So are there enough of those? Has your team identified that there could be more, or if they have the little, there's also the smaller mobile ones that they sometimes have outside schools and things. Do we have, or does Waka Kotahi have those on the peninsula in place? Because there's no point that having to come from Auckland if you've got 3 hours of traffic queued up to get past in the first place.
So TCDC have 2 that we use for alcohol ban and general messaging. So we had one in Hahei for traffic management, things like that. The NZTA main boards, that's something that we haven't really investigated with them. It's managed by their journey management sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've often seen those when you're coming over the bridge and it says, oh, you know, to get to Whitianga from through Thames is this amount of time and the other way is that amount of time. But I guess it's if that's something that council could resource to have a couple of extra smaller ones that might help with that problem that Terry was saying about getting to Pawanui and getting to Prescott's and having to turn around. Oh, sorry, Len said that.
But it'll also be something that we could push NZTA to do and manage as part of that sort of wider traffic management program. You're talking about extra signage and things like that. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And it's something that we can take up at regional land transport level as well. So we try and work on multiple levels. Thank you. Any other questions of Brian? And well done. But you know, I know it was a whole team behind you, but summer seemed to certainly go in really smoothly. And talking to the business operators out there, they're certainly relieved to have a better summer than they have done in previous years. So thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We need to receive that. So let me just. Thank you. Mover and second. All those in favour? Thank you. Stephen, welcome. Item 3.2 recovery report. The handsome Mr. Stephen Town. And Helen Flynn, welcome. Always nice to see you. Of this one? Sure. Right. Well done on this report. It's quite comprehensive. I'm not going to lie and say I read all of it in every detail, but it's there for my weekend reading, but I've had a good run through it and it's well done, comprehensive and detailed. Thank you. So Stephen, over to you if you want to just give us a summary. Helen's driving. Okay.
Mr. Say.
All right.
Worth hearing.
Oh, Marina, I just want to jump through to our key learnings really, because I think reflecting on our journey over the last 2 years has been really useful for us. And the bullet points there are a big, a high level summary, but it all boils down to relationships. And we've just heard from Brian about the pre-summer briefing that they do with the agencies. That's been going on for a few years, and that plus the fact 2017 it seems like we've been in and out of response quite a bit. Our relationships have really been built and cemented with our agencies, and that just plays out when we have when we do go into response and recovery. So bringing those agencies together to develop the recovery plan was really, it wasn't just council's recovery plan, it was our district's recovery plan. And that meant that we had a lot more, the interagency collaboration meant that there wasn't some duplication, but it also meant that we had a lot more mana or power when talking higher up the food chain to try and get things enacted. The other key learning was our social navigator role. So I just want to acknowledge Kath Marketing, who is online. Kia ora, Kath. Yeah. So we didn't, that role didn't commence until June. You know, our events were sort of January, February, and some of it going into March almost. And I think that delay, that was when we had the funding and got someone in place. But that role was so crucial with not just supporting our communities. There was two roles, supporting our communities, but those placard property owners. So just acknowledging that work Kath did. There was initially resistance. People are really frustrated. And having someone that is their one face that they deal with when they're dealing with council, that's there supporting them when they're talking to building inspectors was really invaluable. And even I was just reflecting on one placard property owner I did a little bit of help with in December, and I got a text on Christmas Day from her. So it's just that relationship has made a big difference to those people. We're no longer the enemy. So not all of us are the enemy, but that's what it felt like to them in the beginning. So I really think it's a really good step that navigation service is now embedded into the community partnerships team, which means that we're better placed to be a smoother transition from that welfare response straight into that recovery support. The collaboration with communities, I just had a quote from a community partnerships meeting last week, which was do nothing for us without us. And that I think is just our community engagement has been living that localism theme. 13 years ago, I was reflecting, we had 6 emergency community response groups, and now we've got 40. And it's best practice now in New Zealand, what we have set up, what the council has set up with our communities. The Never Waste a Good Emergency, the fact that we've now funded the resources for those communities has made a big benefit, but basically it's the people in our communities that have stood up and are there for that response. There was one event in 2017, we had 100 road closures around the state highway network. When that happens again, we've got our communities we know have got go-to places in those communities. So that has been a big win, I think, for us through this response. And of course, our roading network, it's our lifeline. So just acknowledging that relationship with NZTA. So big thank you to Pam, who's done a huge amount of work in that community response space, and Kath and previously Cheryl in that social navigation space. Anything else that you had to add, Stephen?
I think just to add to Helen's summary around the preparedness of communities, I think they're in a much better place than they were before those North Island weather events at the beginning of 2023. Now that won't get tested fully until we have another event. We don't want to wish for another event, but there will be a test coming to see how much of that capability and preparedness bursts into action when we have the next event. And certainly through 2024, the risk is that the longer you are from the last event, just the slight, edge of preparedness starts to wane because people are comfortable that things are going quite well. So don't forget that there will be another event and events, and we're one day closer to it than we were yesterday.
Thanks, Stephen. And I think that's the sobering thought that those who've been watching the news of the events in Queensland at the moment, it really is sobering to see what's going on with the climate change effects and the shoreline, and terrifying. But we've been there. we know what that looks like. So,
Yeah.
Terry, please.
Yeah, I found the report really interesting to read. When you go to things, and I look at the resilient lifelines on, I think page, I was talking 78 particularly, you've made some comments here around water intakes blocked and pump stations inundated, flooding, and you made some good points. But how do we make some resilience around that for the next event? Are we getting locals involved with these to go and make sure that they're cleaned out? Are we looking for money? How do we make these more resilient?
I think through you, Chair, the main improvement that you will have seen in waters and will see as we go forward is driven by a couple of things. One is the water reforms that are underway. The second is the programs that Mo and the team put together post those events. They are continuing to be built, maintained, improved. I don't know if we'll ever hit the kind of peak potential that you might try to maintain in your whole water, wastewater, stormwater network, because again, there's a limit to how much you can do, but there is good progress being made, and it will continue because you're budgeting to do that work.
Thanks, Stephen. Robin, please.
Thank you. Once again, this is it's a long report, but it was worth every word to read. And I think the thing that brought me the greatest comfort about this is attachment B, looking through the framework for recovery and seeing the status of all of the different actions as being complete or seamlessly put into BAU. And that gives me a lot of comfort that this is bigger than and more important and more embedded into the organisation than just the governors. This is the operational relationships. This is the way we operate as council, and that gives me an amazing amount of comfort in terms of knowing that this is a plan that is going to keep us going in future events, regardless of what this table looks like. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Robin. Peter, please.
Thanks. Yeah, look, a great report, and any report that's got lots of pictures and tables is a good report in my books. So thank you for that. That was easy to follow. My question is around on page 66, where the report talks about placarded properties and the BAU support, et cetera, provided to placarded properties. And I guess my question is, what is that support that we're actually providing, and when on earth is it going to end? At which point does it no longer become something that we are doing, but something that is being picked up by other, the insurance companies or whatever it is, whatever that, it just felt like an potentially endless stream.
Yeah, certainly the getting down to these latest numbers, I think we've got 23 in total, 7 red and 16 yellow, and they are the kind of hard ones to solve. And that's partly the way that we have interpreted the direction that you gave us back in 2023, which was to make sure that individual property owners understood their obligations and what they needed to do to change to get to a non-placarded property effectively. We've now shrunk our area of interest to reflect the fact that we have a very small number. And so we are completely back to kind of BAU for all of the properties in this district, except for the 23. The 23 I would characterise as being owned by people who are having challenges in making their own way through the various systems, engineering reports, insurance claims, etc. That that's not our place, but where we can, we have facilitated solutions and we've tried to point people in the right direction. And we've done things like, for example, waive building consent fees, where we know if we do that, we actually trigger success, but we have not, we've been very careful not to take on the obligations that are actually the obligations of third parties. But we've been prepared to try and facilitate some of those difficult circumstances so that the property owner ends up in a better place than when we started.
Thanks, Stephen. I've got John Grant, and then I'll come to you, Peter.
Thanks, Stephen, for the report. It's very comprehensive and very helpful to go through, and it actually stimulates your thought process, I think, which I found really helpful to actually track through some of the things that have taken place. And I think from a council perspective, we look at what we have done, and we've done a great job really in the recovery space. I think, to me, the observation was it was the peripheral groups on the outside that took control of certain aspects of things that where it probably became more complicated and more challenging. And specifically, I'm talking about organisations like EQC and which are changed its name now to Natural Hazards, and the examples that I saw of the observations of properties here in Thames Coromandel was that it didn't solve the problems that they had, and therefore there was no solution. You know, we couldn't suddenly come there with a bucket load of money to solve the problem. And EQC didn't solve the problem, so the problem existed and will continue to exist. And I think that hopefully those learnings are getting through to that organisation so that they can have a look to see whether they have gaps that need to be filled for the future to avoid those things being repeated again. I think the one that stands out to me, and it's probably quite controversial, but you know, it was the Cathedral Cove questions and the whole management and relationship with the people that were impacted by the closure for that extended period of time of Cathedral Cove, and the role that the council played. I know DOC led, but I don't believe that it's their natural skill set in regard to leading a community communication process around that. And for that, I think we received a lot of flack that was probably not fairly focused towards us. And there's probably some learnings out of that that I didn't pick up from this about how we interface into that a lot quicker to avoid those sort of things from happening. And I think the second stage of that now is the learnings that come out of it in regard to sustainability and the assessments of what sort of damage and how things can be rectified. So I think it's really good, but my encouragement would be dig one layer underneath what you've written here and look at the things that we can take out that could be utilised as observations that we could learn from going forward, and perhaps do things a little differently or do a bit more lobbying and be seen to be doing that. PowerCo to me is a really good example. Boy, they've done a lot of work on robustness of the network around the place, but I don't believe the average person out there knows that. And you know, all the work that they've been doing recently about their fibre linking to keep a tally as to what's taking place is going to give even greater robustness, but they've not communicated that well at all. So my little observations for you.
Thank you. Peter, please.
Thanks. Stephen, if I could just take you back to the response to the question I asked. I'm just if I can just ask a point of clarification, is that okay?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
please.
thank you. So thank you for the assurance that that we're not owning things that we're not supposed to own in terms of resolutions and what have you. So the fact that this is a statement that these things now are business as usual, does that mean that the staff in the various parts of council who are dealing with a consent application or a need for a report or whatever it is, they are now the ones that will be dealing with these 23 just as a BAU process, and they understand what leniency or what scope that they have to assist these 23 homeowners?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say, well, yeah, we're kind of there, I think, and so I'll be attending my final placard meeting internally next week, and that will then be picked up by Brian and Tamil. And yeah, by and large, and it's been going in this direction for some months, is that we've been working away at trying to shrink the number so that we could then realistically return to BAU and not have to come forward with requests for we need X, Y, and Z to solve this problem. I think we can solve those small numbers, still take some effort, but we've got 3 or 4 staff in different roles who are involved enough and understand the issues in the right way, and they will help us solve those placard problems and allow us to move forward. And of course, when there is a significant event that affects private property into the future, then we kind of stand ready to respond with their inspections or whatever rapid response inspections and so on. That will just happen because it is genuinely BAU. And I think we should say for Aileen, looking at the staffing, the numbers and the capability, we are a relatively small organisation, and we're probably quite lightly, we're lightly staffed. We're not heavy with a lot of staff looking for things to do. They are busy people.
Thanks, Stephen.
Does that help, Peter? Does that help answer your question? Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Aileen, you wanted to say a few words?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that today is Stephen's last day in front of council. So I just wanted to say a few words, and I had a visit last week from the civil defence team from the group. It was quite interesting. They were coming to talk to me about putting a bit of pressure on me to get on with, appointing a recovery manager, because when Stephen leaves the organisation, we then have a hole that we have to think about in terms of recovery. But they also made the point that the experience we had post Gabriel was a best practice, and they were looking to us to learn from us. And I think probably the success can be attributed to the quality of the person that stepped in to support us. And Stephen's one of the most humble people I've ever worked with. And I know he's sitting there going, I wish she'd not stop talking. But I do want to say that Stephen's leadership style is one I've teased him a little bit, that he stands behind with the cattle prodder and prods people along. But really what he does is leads from behind. He grows people around him and supports people around him. I think you call that level 5 leadership. Never do you see Stephen out the front going, hey, look what I've done. It's always, hey, look what the folk around me have done. And they've done it with his support and with him growing folk within our organisation. So just a really big thank you from me for what you've done for us. You've had an impact right across the organisation, across the leadership team and on me, and just really, really appreciate that. And I'm not quite sure how we got so lucky, to be honest. And I guess there was a chance meeting between Brian and Stephen in Whangamata one day that kind of led to that. But the reality is Stephen chose to come to support us and support the community that he now lives in, when many people around the country are looking for Stephen to come and support them on probably much bigger and more significant things than the recovery of the Thames Coromandel. So just wanted to say that. Secondly, I also want to just pay a bit of a tribute to DIA of all organisations, because after the cyclones, you'll recall, and Helen alluded to it before, that in March we were still in chaos and funding didn't turn up till June. And I spent ages talking to government going, when is the cavalry arriving? Because it isn't here. And we were spending an awful lot of our time briefing Wellington, spending time on Wellington's problems while we were trying to recover here. And they did very little to help us until DIA turned up as the cavalry. And they've basically funded our recovery program. So the discussions we're having around council at the moment, you know how difficult it is to find operational funding and what a rating impact that has. What DIA did for us was they gave us operational funding, and it's amounted to, we've basically had Stephen at no cost to us for the last 2 years doing that recovery because of that DIA funding that we received. So, yeah, so thank you to Stephen and to DIA.
We need a new president for the Wrong Ratepayers Association. We're going to have a chat.
Thanks, Aileen. And I would endorse that as well. Stephen, you've been a pleasure to work with. I know you haven't quite finished yet, but last time in front of council, we really appreciate the contribution that you've made. And I also just want to acknowledge when Aileen talks about the DIA operational funding, a lot of that was due to your relationships and the strength of your relationships that you came with. And without those, we would have been, there would have been a huge gap in our funding. So I think this council owes a vote of thanks to you as well for that. But the team working together achieved some really good results. So thank you. Any words? You don't have
Look,
to.
just to reiterate, and Aileen captured that, was, you know, I'm a ratepayer of the district, and that was part of the motivation to help when Brian plucked up the courage to say g'day to me in the street. And yeah, it's nice when things like that happen. And I've enjoyed working here and being part of it, and I think the team will do well going forward. Good luck, Helen.
Thank you, Stephen. All right. Do we, yeah, I'll move from the chair. Is it just to receive? Thank you. Round a second. All right. Thank you so much. And all those in favour? Thank you. Thank you once again, Stephen and Helen. We've got Mayoral Report, and then I reckon we'll stop for a cup of tea. So I'll move from the chair that the Mayoral Report be received. Can I get a seconder for that, please? Sally, all those in favour? All right, thank you. No questions? Peter, did you have a question?
Not about the Mayoral Report.
All right.
But we've passed that, haven't we? Mayoral Report.
Yes.
Just normally at this point, we have a chief executive report, and I'm just wondering what happened.
Oh, we spoke about this in the last meeting, where I said we'd do an exceptions only report because the agenda had basically closed the day we were presenting the last chief executive report to you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we won't move into public excluded. We'll go and have a cup of tea, and then we'll move into public excluded after that. Is that the, or would you prefer to move into public excluded before we go to?
Through the chair, I think I would prefer now, so
Okay.
it's recorded.
Yep.
Okay. And then we can have morning tea.
And then we'll come back. All right. Thank you. Seconder. We've done that. Right. All right.
Thank you.
All those in favour? Thank you.
I just wanted to raise a question about the degree of that we need to be in public excluded on a topic that I believe will have a great deal of interest from a transparency point of view. So, I'd encourage us to really have a good conversation about that particular point and what we're able to release out of it, and particularly the voting, if any, through that process.
Good question. And I got a text from John Freer asking the same question. I asked Aileen to take a look at that question, Aileen and Ari, and Aileen gave a really good response to that. Would you be happy to share the details of that response? Sure. Because it was pretty comprehensive.
To read it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Can we just clarify which number? We haven't specified which number because there's two things that are public excluded.
And can I just, from a disclosure point of view, confirm that I've not had a conversation with John Freer in regard to this topic?
Yes.
So I did a response, which is effectively the reason the report is in public excluded is there are some key numbers that are commercially sensitive related to tender processes and commercial dealings that are currently in process. Those processes will likely complete in April. Our recommendation is to discuss the matter in public excluded and then release redacted decisions after the meeting. Assuming council agree to that, those resolutions should be fairly fulsome with a few numbers redacted until those tender processes are complete. Staff did look at different ways of drafting the report that would enable the consideration of the item in open meeting, but struggled given the nature of the conversation required. It's also not a final decision. We don't actually adopt until the 27th of March, so this is a stage along the way, but the key figures that we need to discuss are commercially sensitive for at least the next month. And that's the response I gave to the question.
Yep. All right, you happy with that, John? Yeah, I thought it was a good response. Thank you, Aileen. All right, cup of tea. Thanks, team.